All right. Well, this remains your show.
Oh, I forgot about that. I was so excited that we got finished with that information. We were going back to some more written material that we got from the Pfeffer files, and had a couple of things that tickled me from letters from Willie Gilzenberg. And one of them is a copy of a letter from Willie Gilzenberg to Vince McMahon Sr. This ended up in Pfeffer's files because he was given a copy. And it starts with, dear, this is March 20th, 1960. So this is the period of time, Brian, where Vince McMahon Sr.'s television program out of Washington has gotten another foothold in New York, and he has been supplying talent to Madison Square Garden for some time before that, maybe a year and a half or whatever, since the last time Pfeffer was ousted, right? But now there's a change, the machinations behind the scenes. Pedro Martinez, who had bought into the Manhattan booking office, had pulled out. He said he got screwed. He went back to Buffalo. McMahon had a booking agency supplying talent, but so did Colaquariani, who was trying to still, because he was behind Rocca, so he was still trying to be the force behind Wrestling in the Garden. And then Pfeffer came in again. And that's where Pfeffer not only brought in Ricky Starr and brought back the Fargos, but he brought in the amazing Zuma, the mighty Zuma, the little Rocca ripoff that we've talked about. That the only time this guy ever drew money in his life was in Madison Square Garden, and he and Rocca against each other because of the interest in Rocca and a guy doing Rocca stuff, the gimmick clash. They sold out 3 times. One of them was, hold on here. One of them was 21,890 people with a gate of $64,125. One of them was 21,950 people with $64,680. And again, $64,000 in 1960 is the equivalent of almost $700,000 in today's money. And this was when the Garden was running sometimes more often than once a month. But so right at this point, with these offices jockeying for power, Willie Gilzenberg is still, who's a longtime confidant of Vince Sr., but also was close to Pfeffer for years and years, right? And they all did business. So Gilzenberg writes a letter to Vince McMahon Sr., and he says, Dear Vince, the late George M. Cohan is the author of the following. The theater is illusion, and once you destroy the illusion, you destroy the theater. And apparently what they had done is Pampero Firpo was booked into the territory, was booked into Willie Gilzenberg's Newark shows that he promoted. But on another town in the territory, he's writing to Vince to complain that Firpo had to do a job for Arnold Skaaland. Because listen to this. I write this, the above quote, because of the fact that Pampero Firpo was placed right in the center of the ring to look up into the sun by Arnold Skaaland in capital letters. He says, it's really hard to believe this comes under the heading of an error. Just how did this happen? Could it be due to me saying over TV, if you think Bruno Sammartino is strong, just watch Firpo here next Thursday night? There certainly could have been another way to make up time. Babe and I have really, that was his partner in promotion, Babe and I have really put some money into the business since October, plus an added amount of woes for me to carry due to Babe's illness. Firpo, a new face who is sure to draw a satisfactory crowd, to the Newark Armory on April 2nd certainly wasn't deserving of this in advance of this type promotion. Perhaps I am wrong and everyone else associated correct, but I still must refer to the great and late George M. Cohan's characterization of illusion. Please let's try and figure something for Thursday that will place Firpo in a similar category to Zuma prior to the little fellow's matches with Rocca. It can be done.
The little fellow?
Yes. So basically they said, he's saying, you brought this guy in here and you put him over everybody and he drew money with Rocca, but we bring Firpo in. I've got him in a big match at my town and you have him do a job to Arnold Skolin. What is the matter with you people?
And that would have been Firpo's dream, to work with Rocca. You know, it's interesting because we're talking 1960. So we're talking before Vince Sr. and Kohler really get down and dirty together, before that breaks apart. This is the beginning of the period of time where Bruno becomes a draw. Bruno gets blacklisted.
Yeah.
And then becomes a bigger draw in other places, and Vince Sr. needs him post-Rocca. Was Skoland already considered office, or was he office in 1960?
No. The way that it's phrased, to make up time, I'm thinking that there was a substitution, or somebody was running late, or they changed something up and say, oh, well, let's put the baby face over. Ignoring the fact that at that point in time, the difference between Arnold Skolin, who was and I loved Arnie when I knew him 35 years after this, but at the time, he was doing the opening match in the Garden. If he was on the Garden card, he was just a preliminary guy. He may have, at that point, they may have, started asking him to, do some of the other towns, or White Plains became his building long after that, but maybe he was starting to try to get an interest in promoting some spot shows or whatever, but I would doubt it even that early.
Because just based on what he's saying here, again, trying to read between the lines, if Willie Gilzenberg, was he actually on TV and said, hey, come out to Newark this week and see Firpo, he's just as strong as Bruno?
Yes.
And then they sent Skoland to squash him?
No, on another show they had put in the area, they had put Firpo over Skoland over Firpo. And news traveled. It was in the same market. And that's what he's like, what the fuck? We've got him in a big featured spot in Newark, and on this other show, you put him in the ring with Skolin and put Skolin over. They were very touchy about their towns.
And again, it's an interesting insight into that relationship. Willie Gilzenberg would be a partner in WWF until he died in, 77?
Yeah, he was the president figurehead president for years and years.
But he was still the promoter. I mean, he had all these towns in New Jersey. Vince Sr. was a DC guy, not a New York guy. And if he wanted to control the Garden, and he did, he needed towns around the Garden. And Willie Gilzenberg was the key to getting New Jersey.
Yeah, Gilzenberg.
Patterson, Newark. I mean, he had every town in New Jersey up here.
And he went back with boxing and wrestling way before Vince Sr. had even,
No, he went back to Jess McMahon. He was the connection to Jess McMahon, actually, because of the boxing end.
So, at any rate, that was a letter. But then here is a letter from Willie Gilzenberg to Jack Pfeffer, which is, again, in the same time, May 28th, 1960, where I believe at that point, I'm looking at these results, Pfeffer was about to get kicked out again, I believe, because the Fargos are there during this time, even Sonny, but they would be leaving soon, and Zuma would be moved down. Oh, I think Pfeffer was still there because the Rebel, Mario Galento, was the Rebel later on in 1960. But nevertheless, the tensions of all of these people trying to swerve each other out of the way. This is from Gilzenberg to Pfeffer. Dear Jack, in marking Firpo's name in red pencil on the ad you sent me, one would think that I was working against a friend of mine. I think it was Willie Gilzenberg. He's speaking of himself in the third person. I think it was Willie Gilzenberg who took Mr. Firpo and put him on top in Newark Armory with Rocca and a friend of mine, Jack Pfeffer, who refused to say a kind word for this same Firpo. So again, Gilzenberg's loving Pampero Firpo, and he's not getting any support. But Babe wrote me and told me that you were on a couple of times this past week to plug Firpo in the Garden Show. This brings me back to Jack Pfeffer, speaking to Jack Pfeffer, who I now think, and I hope I'm wrong, is out to hurt our Newark promotions and also out to do the same to Vince McMahon because he brought Buddy Rogers into the territory. So apparently a lot of this problem, Pfeffer, by this time, Rogers had years before cut loose from him, but Pfeffer never forgot it and hated Buddy Rogers. That's why he gave the Fargos kind of a tag team Buddy Rogers gimmick. He was always trying to undermine Rogers wherever he went. And so now Vince Sr. has brought Rogers in. He's starting to get over. Pfeffer doesn't want to have anything to do with him. Gilzenberg is the one that's been there through all of these people, is trying to, get along with everybody, right?
He's the one who's actually known Rogers the second longest, or maybe even the longest next to Pfeffer, because he was promoting New Jersey towns when Buddy broke in.
Yeah, well, listen to what he says next. I don't particularly care for Buddy Rogers. I must admit, however, he is a great spot performer, meaning high spots. And as such, I'm interested in Rogers or any wrestler who can draw in big barns like the armories we promote in. Jack, if you do a blessed thing wrong to Vince McMahon by way of Cola Quariani, you will have to cross me off your list. Huh. I don't care to repeat all the happenings before you got into the territory because there isn't a thing I can say that you do not know. There were many roadblocks at that time, and if I were Vince, they would return before you could say Pampero Firpo. And that's simply because your feelings against Rogers are so tremendous that you fail to see that you are deliberately hurting fellows like Willie and Babe, him and his partner, also Vince and Phil Zacco, with your picayune maneuverings.
With your what?
Jack, picayune maneuverings. Small-time bullshit. Jack, I don't think there ever was a friend you ever made in wrestling with the guts of a Willie Gilzenberg in your corner. Why lose that kind of a pal? Do you think I'm envious of you being able to place 4 men on a garden show? I'm very happy for you, and that's what my aim was for the past couple of years, to see that you can come into the territory and become a part of it. I didn't think you would place yourself in a position of appearing as one who would bite the hand that feeds him. Jack, all of your gloating wouldn't mean a thing if Buddy Rogers, Eddie Graham, and this is the way it's written, and the 2 colored boys told Cola and Walter Johnston and Prince Charles to go and blank themselves. Who knows that better than you? So instead of gloating, I think you would be much wiser to be satisfied to go along without hurting others. As for the top bout in the garden, my opinion is that it is a poor bout at this time. The underneath is well loaded, but even that could be improved by pairing the colored boys as a team against either the Fargos or Rogers and Graham. But that's only my opinion. I hope I'm wrong and there's a good house in Madison Square Garden, if only for the reason that a good house is helpful to the business. Warmest regards, Gilly.
Wow, that is fascinating. Weird question to start with Prince Charles. I mean, is he just referring to, the current king because he was a boy at that time, or is there someone...
No, Walter and Prince Charles, I think, is Walter and Charles Johnston, the garden promoters, the Johnston family. And their longest running wrestling advisor had been Cola Quariani because he had the key to Rocca.
Yeah.
So he had to, and, at various points, he would be aligned with different people based on the way the wind was blowing.
What do you think of apparently Pfeffer not being a fan of Pampero Firpo? It almost seems like he'd be right down his alley, the exact kind of person that.
Well, I don't know what I'm going back here to hold on to look at the. Apparently, when Pfeffer would mark things in red pencil on ads or programs he got, that meant he was wanting whoever that he was sending that to look at what they're doing to me. They're double crossing me. So it may have been in some previous conversation that, I don't know that Pfeffer was pissed at Firpo. Pfeffer was probably pissed that Firpo was on Gilzenberg's card at the same time as something else or whatever.
Did you ever hear anything about the relationship, if there was any, between Jackie Fargo and Buddy Rogers? Like, if they ran into each other, what was that conversation like?
Well, here's the thing. At one point, Fargo was quoted when they asked him about him. How much did Buddy Rogers influence you? Well, I never saw him. But obviously, that was the influence. And Jackie, especially, I don't think Don just took the name of the gimmick like he took all the names and the gimmicks, but Jackie more, they took the strut, but Jackie more consciously was a Buddy Rogers disciple in terms of even calling everybody Pally in a locker room or, shit like that. And not only the strut, but the hair and some of the robes, and especially his work as a heel. He was a big influence because he was an influence on, on all of the fucking boys of that generation, like Flair was, and then Michaels and etc. But I think of the Fargos, Don, he had the better body and he did the strut, but he didn't keep the blonde hair. He didn't keep that gift throughout his life. Jackie did. I think Jackie was more of a Southern version of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. And especially with the babyface promo appeal that he had. He didn't get a chance to do a lot of heel promos, Jackie, after 61 or 62, but the genuineness of and a lot of the old Rogers tricks and high spots and, et cetera. So he was definitely influenced.
Are you surprised Willie Gilzenberg put all of that into a letter in 1960 as a wrestling promoter?
Well, no, because that's what they did then when they were writing to each other personally. The letters are amazing and you can kind of get an idea, but still it would be a forensic job of years to be able to put all of these files there at Notre Dame and all the letters together and connect all the dots. It would be, I don't know if it can ever be done, to determine exactly who was on the ins and outs with who at what time and why all through those decades.